I gave notice after 5 years, faced a £400 garden claim, found my deposit unprotected, and ended up with £6.5K in compensation. Last year, I relocated from a house that I had leased for 5 years without any issues. My relationship with the landlord was consistently positive. There are two important details relevant to this narrative. One, in the United Kingdom, where I reside, the typical procedure for renting a property involves signing a lease agreement for 1 year. At the end of that year, if you wish to continue renting and the landlord agrees, you can simply take no action and the lease will automatically extend until either the tenant or landlord provides notice. Alternatively, you can renew the 1-year lease each year, although this is not strictly necessary as some landlords prefer it. My landlord requested that I sign a new lease each year. Fine, no problem. Since I occupied the house for 5 years, there were 5 lease agreements in total. 2. Legally, the landlord was obligated to safeguard my security deposit. This required her to place it in a designated account within 30 days of receipt. The tenant is then provided with login details for the account to verify that it is protected and to view relevant information. The intention of this is to ensure that the deposit is held by an impartial party who can mediate if there are disputes regarding any deductions. The tenant can initiate a free dispute process. After living in the house for nearly 5 years, I provided notice to terminate the lease, as I was in the process of purchasing a home. Following my notice, the landlord emailed to inquire if I intended to hire a gardener to restore the garden to the neat condition it was in when I moved in. I found this request peculiar, since my lease agreement explicitly prohibited me from performing certain actions in the garden that would have been necessary to maintain its original appearance. For instance, it stated that I was not allowed to trim any shrubs or bushes. Therefore, all I had done was mow the lawn and trim the hedge. Essentially, that clause seemed to be intended for a landlord who planned to manage the garden themselves. However, she had not maintained it during my time there. It now seems she did not review her own lease agreement accurately. I replied to her email regarding the garden, referencing the relevant section of the lease that prohibited me from certain actions and expressing my bewilderment. I requested clarification on her expectations for the garden's condition, given the terms of the lease. She did not respond, but a few weeks later, I received an email from her partner stating that the landlord was concerned about the garden and that I should ensure it was returned to its original state. I responded to him, once again seeking clarification in light of the lease's wording. He replied indicating that he would have the landlord contact me directly, which she never did. Without further direction concerning the garden, I simply did my best. My boyfriend, who has gardening experience, undertook the work, and I asked him to do whatever he deemed necessary. He pruned bushes and removed a significant amount of debris. I spent several £100s on clearing up garden waste. While I realized I technically did not have to do this, I wanted to maintain a favorable relationship with the landlord. I vacated the property, and after not hearing from the landlord for a couple of weeks and not receiving my deposit back, I emailed her to inquire about it. After previously ignoring my questions about the garden, she chose this moment to inform me that she intended to deduct £400 from my deposit for gardening work. This initiated a lengthy email exchange where I pointed out that the terms of the lease were inconsistent with my ability to restore the garden to its original condition. And she repeatedly stated that the garden had not been returned to her, as it had been when I moved in. Ultimately, I proposed that since we could not agree on the deductions from my deposit, we should utilize the independent dispute resolution process offered by the company managing the deposit. That process required initiation by the landlord, so I asked her to authorize it. Instead, she continued to send me emails attempting to negotiate a compensation amount for the garden, which I was unwilling to consider. In addition, I was unable to access the account where my deposit was held. After contacting the company, I discovered that my landlord had, accidentally, entered my email address incorrectly when registering the deposit, which I found strange since she had successfully emailed me numerous times while I lived there. Without access to the account, I was unable to officially challenge any deductions she proposed. There is a 3-month window following the end of the tenancy during which any deductions can be disputed. Beyond that, A tenant must either accept what the landlord offers or pursue the matter in court. According to Justice for Tenants, whom I consulted for guidance, it is not uncommon for unscrupulous landlords to incorrectly register tenants' information in an effort to complicate deposit recovery within the available time frame. After an extensive back and forth with the deposit company, I finally gained access to my deposit account. Upon reviewing the information, I noticed that the landlord had not secured my deposit until the day after I submitted my notice to end the lease. This indicated that she had protected my deposit significantly after the legally mandated 30-day deadline. There are consequences for landlords who fail to comply with deposit protection laws. If they violate the rules and the tenant takes legal action, they are required to return the entire deposit, plus an amount ranging from 1 to 3 times the deposit as compensation. Furthermore, they cannot make any deductions from a tenant's deposit if they fail to adhere to legal requirements. I sent a firmer email to the landlady than I had previously. Our correspondence had been amicable but increasingly chilly. I emphasized that she could not deduct anything from my deposit because she had not followed the law. In response, she sent a rather petulant, insulting email and authorized the return of my full deposit. While I was relieved to receive my deposit back, I was taken aback by her disdain when I had committed no wrongdoing. I was frustrated by her attempts to take advantage of me and the countless hours I wasted resolving this issue. The mere sight of an email from her became a source of anxiety at that point. This is when the situation became more intriguing. As I mentioned, landlords who do not comply with deposit protection laws are liable to pay compensation ranging from 1 to 3 times the deposit amount, in addition to returning the original deposit if taken to court. The documentation from the tenancy deposit scheme confirmed that she had violated the law. While I had already received my deposit back, it was evident that if I pursued legal action, I would be entitled to at least the same amount again. The crucial detail was that I did not have just one lease agreement with her. As noted earlier, she insisted on my signing a new lease annually. Therefore, I had 5 lease agreements in total. After spending several hours reviewing the legislation and my previous correspondence, I discovered that she had failed to properly secure my deposit for all 5 tenancies. I had ample documentation to substantiate this. Consequently, if I took her to court, I stood to recover a minimum of not 1 but 5 times my original deposit, over £6,500. The cost to take her to court would be a few £100s, and I was completely prepared to do that. In fact, I was looking forward to the challenge. To initiate legal action, I first needed to send her a letter before action, outlining my grievances and offering her a chance to avoid court. I had a barrister friend advising me pro bono at this point. The landlord responded to my letter rather dismissively, asserting that it was, clearly, just an administrative error that led to her failing to secure my deposit correctly each year for 5 years, which I found amusing, and accused me of seeking an undeserved windfall. I replied to her email, correcting her inaccuracies and reiterating the need for her to make an offer to prevent court proceedings. After some time, she responded with an offer of £4,000. I informed her that the least I would accept was slightly over £6,500. I do not recall the exact amount, as that was the minimum I would potentially receive if the matter went to court. She accepted my terms, albeit with certain stipulations, perhaps conditions she believed I might struggle to meet, such as requesting copies of all documentation related to the deposits from previous years. But I was able to fulfill those conditions immediately. Once the funds were deposited into my account, I emailed her to convey that I would have retracted my complaints at any point had she offered a genuine apology, which was indeed true, up until her final insulting email. I also expressed my hope that she would treat her future tenants with greater fairness and consideration. She did not respond. I sincerely hope to never again find myself in the position of a tenant, but after enduring years of dissatisfaction with unprofessional landlords and letting agents, it felt gratifying to conclude my renting experience with such a rewarding and impactful statement. Story 2. I finally called out my toxic friend after months of buildup and blocked her without hesitation. Was I wrong for protecting myself? WTF. I, 18 female, had a best friend of 1.5 years, 18 female, who I recently realized was a terrible person. It was not as if I suddenly assumed or realized on a random day. Everything she did gradually accumulated over time, and one day I just could no longer tolerate it. So I contemplated the situation and discussed it with some of my friends before deciding to address it. Below is a list of everything she has done to me, fabricating stories about people being attracted to her simply because they showed interest in me. Deceiving others about her ability to speak several languages, as I speak multiple languages myself. I know this because some of my closest friends traveled with her and witnessed her interacting with locals in the languages she allegedly speaks, only to hear her repeating the same phrase over and over, as if she were mocking them. Dismissing my interests and talents, making them seem trivial simply because she is not skilled in those areas. She has done this to everyone she has been friends with. Engaging in a sexual relationship with the guy I liked while being aware of my feelings for him, and when I expressed that it hurt me, she turned the tables and made it seem like I was the one at fault. Only after she slept with someone else did she attempt to mend our friendship. This person was in a relationship, and she recounted the story without any sense of guilt, as if she had done nothing wrong. Lying about why people dislike her and advising me not to associate with them. Spreading rumors about another girl for no reason, and then asserting that this girl was a bad person, advising me against being her friend. These rumors severely damaged this girl's reputation, making me and her other friends feel as though our problems are insignificant compared to hers. On one occasion, all three of us had our hearts broken simultaneously, and she unexpectedly claimed, "I think my problem is the worst," which made both my friend and me visibly uncomfortable. For context, based on what I know about her upbringing, she has a very loving family with whom she has a good relationship and who provide her with a great deal of support. I typically sense when something is not quite right with someone, but I did not get that impression when I met her family. She has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, so I initially hesitated to cut her out of my life, considering whether her issues affected her behavior. However, I believe she is still accountable for her actions. While mental health can provide an explanation, it does not excuse her incredibly poor conduct. I contemplated ending our friendship for about a month or two because I did not want her to paint me as the villain. However, I felt increasingly worse each day, and the more I reflected on the situation, the angrier I became because I knew I was not the first person she had treated poorly. Many of our mutual friends, or former mutual friends, severed ties with her at the earliest opportunity because she had done similar things to them. After speaking with them and others who know her, I discovered that this behavior was a pattern. I wanted to be the one to confront her and ensure it did not happen again. So I sent her the following message a couple of days ago and then blocked her on all platforms before she had a chance to respond, because I anticipated she would make me feel terrible about it regardless of her response. I had emotionally distanced myself from this friendship around 2 months earlier when I started recognizing her as a terrible person. I knew if I communicated my feelings, she would twist it against me or manipulate the situation to garner another chance, and I had simply had enough. The message I sent read, "Hello, this will be a lengthy message. I do not want any explanations, apologies, or messages accusing me of being a bad person. I simply need to express my thoughts and then move on. I believe our friendship has reached its end, and I do not think we are benefiting one another any longer. During our friendship, there have been numerous instances where I have questioned my own morality, emotions, and self-worth, and I do not wish to feel that way anymore. After everything we have experienced together, I no longer feel I can openly share my life, successes, and struggles with you, as there have been many occasions when you made me feel inadequate or unaccomplished unless you were somehow better than me. I recognize that you have experienced a lot in your life, but that does not entitle you to diminish my accomplishments or abilities. The urge to one-up me is apparent. I recall you claiming that Kay was a terrible person when I mentioned he had shown interest in me, despite you saying just a few months earlier that you contemplated kissing him. I can understand if it were new information. However, you went even further by telling F that he had invited you to his hotel room, which was a blatant falsehood, as the timelines did not align at all. I spoke to several others about it, ensuring your reputation remained intact, and they confirmed that it could not possibly have occurred, so why would you lie? I do not comprehend. Furthermore, regarding the incident with Jay that damaged her reputation, I believe that was entirely unjust on your part and morally wrong. I typically do not take everything at face value, but if individuals I trust and respect are saying something happened, I cannot ignore it. Regarding the G situation, although I eventually got over it, it irrevocably altered my perception of you and our friendship. Your immediate reaction was to place blame on me, implying I was entirely in the wrong, which made me feel unsafe discussing any issues I had in our friendship for fear you would once again turn it against me. It created an environment where I could not voice my concerns without worrying that I would be painted as the villain for merely wanting to have a conversation. This seems hypocritical, considering you advocate for being called out if you do something wrong, as you dislike being ignored or left without communication. Yet, when confronted, you redirected the blame to the other person. I could understand if this were a one-time occurrence, but if I recall correctly, the N incident transpired while I was in Paris during a time when we were not communicating. After that, you came to me wanting to resolve things after being intimate with one of my best friends who was in a committed relationship, and you described it so nonchalantly as if it were not morally questionable. How would you react if the tables were turned? Imagine being in a loving, healthy relationship and your partner cheated with someone aware of that relationship, yet showed no care. I understand the impact of hypersexuality due to trauma, and I recognize the effects of being under the influence, but what transpired indicated a clear lack of self-control. Although I moved past the G incident, when you reached out, you did not offer an apology. It appeared as though your intent was solely to alleviate your own conscience. The timelines of these events do not align with my moral compass. I cherished our friendship while it lasted. However, I feel we have evolved into two very different individuals and that it is no longer fulfilling for either of us. After delivering this message, I blocked her on everything. Now, I am extremely anxious that she has informed our mutual friends that I am a terrible person and urged them not to associate with me anymore, distorting the narrative to make me appear bad. I am also uncertain about how I managed the situation. I know that blocking her immediately without hearing her side does not reflect well, but I am aware of her manipulative tendencies. In any scenario, I will be portrayed as the antagonist, and I want to protect myself from the emotional fallout. Now I find myself second-guessing my choices. I suppose I am just feeling anxious. Am I in the wrong? Please keep this confidential.